My name is Cameron, and I grew up in the shadow of a star. That star was my older sister Lily, dazzling, radiant, and always the center of attention, like a magnet attracting admiring glances. Our house was like a hive of life, full of noisy voices, laughter, and endless movement, as if an endless stream of family and friends were merging into a single living organism, not giving a single chance for privacy. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends, they all flocked to us, attracted not only by my mother's famous barbecue, but also by the opportunity to enjoy Lily's performance again, because in the eyes of everyone around us, she was a real rising star. Our backyard, manicured, with a perfectly manicured lawn and a sprawling old oak tree, invariably turned into a stage, and my father, lighting a grill, filled the air with the enticing aroma of grilled meat and charcoal, while my mother carefully ensured that every guest had a glass of refreshing drink in their hands. As soon as Aunt Marge, an elderly but energetic woman with bright red lips and a permanent headscarf, shouted with cheerful insistence, "Lily, honey, sing us something," all the fuss stopped for a moment, and the eyes of the audience immediately turned to my sister. Lily didn't force herself to beg. She climbed onto a chair with the ease of a circus performer, letting her golden curls fly around her face, smiled slyly, waved her arms, dramatically cleared her throat, and then, filling her chest with air, began to sing. "My Heart Will Go On," her sonorous, albeit imperfect, but full of emotion's voice spread through the courtyard, dragging the audience with it, causing sincere delight among adults and genuine pride among parents. Mom was beaming with her arms folded on her chest, and Dad, wiping away a tear, hummed the words of the chorus in a low voice, as if he couldn't help himself. Everyone was clapping, cheering, laughing, as if they were present at a real stars concert, and I slowly retreated into the shadows, pressing my back against the rough bark of an oak tree, trying to become invisible, merge with the bushes, disappear. It's not that I didn't want to join, I tried. Oh, how many times have I tried? Every time I opened my mouth to sing along, something inside me tightened, my voice trembled treacherously, broke, and the words I had so carefully rehearsed in front of the mirror in my room stuck to my tongue, becoming foreign and awkward. I wasn't Lily, and everyone knew it. The relatives, as if on purpose, whispered as soon as I passed by, "She's so quiet. She doesn't look like her sister at all." But not only them, even the parents, without even noticing it, made it clear who the real star in our family was. Lily was taken to dancing, singing lessons, and art studios, readily developing any of her talents, and I used to get old books from dusty shelves. This, of course, was not a tragedy. I found solace in them, escaped into their worlds, hiding from the feeling of uselessness. The only person who seemed to really understand me was Maggie's great aunt, a woman with cloud gray hair, kind eyes, and a quiet voice. She always found me where I was trying to hide, behind the garage, in the attic or in the treehouse, always with a book in her hands. "What adventure are you on today, Cameron?" she would ask, sitting down next to me, and I would look up at her, grateful for her company, and respond by showing her the cover of another volume. "Ancient Egypt," I said, and Maggie nodded, smiling. "You have a good head on your shoulders, girl, don't let anyone tell you otherwise." These moments with her were more valuable to me than any applause, because only next to her could I be myself, not Lily's sister, not a girl who can't sing, not a forgotten child, but just Cameron. I could read, I could be silent, I could think without fear of other people's eyes, and no one forced me to be someone I wasn't. But even these quiet moments could not drown out the feeling of pain that I felt every time my sister received another praise, reward or gift, new clothes, fashionable gadgets, jewelry. While Lily was becoming more and more dazzling, I had to settle for things that had already passed through someone else's hands. It wasn't envy, rather, it was a feeling of invisibility, the realization that, even being in the same house, I seemed to exist in another world. School became my refuge, even though I never aspired to popularity. The next few months flew by in a blur, filled with a dull, fierce determination that pulsed inside me, forcing me to devote every free minute to my studies, spend every evening poring over additional books, reading every line, clinging to any opportunity that could bring me closer to my goal. Nothing had changed in the house. Lily remained the center of attention. Her mother still sighed admiringly over her every project, and her father patted her on the shoulder with unfailing approval when she talked about her future career plans. They seemed to have forgotten that ill-fated dinner, when they laughed out loud at my dreams, blaming everything on stupidity, teenage maximalism, and naivety, which, in their opinion, I had to outgrow over time. But I wasn't going to give up. I started going to the library even more often than before, sitting there until closing time, filling out notebooks with notes, circling important points in textbooks that I rented with a red pen. I started looking for scholarships, grants, and any opportunities to get funding for my studies, because now I knew for sure that if I didn't take my fate into my own hands, no one would do it for me. I applied, filled out the forms, and reread the terms a dozen times, afraid of missing something important. Sometimes it seemed to me that I was walking on thin ice, that at any second the ground would give way under my feet and I would be left with nothing, but whenever doubts got too close, I remembered their laughter. I remembered how my mother wiped her tears, laughing at me, and how my father calmly and matter-of-factly stated that all the money had gone to Lily, as if it were a matter of course. And that memory only made me angrier. I hardly slept. I fell asleep in the morning, right over my notebooks. I woke up with a headache and red eyes, but I kept going, not letting myself stop, not allowing a single thought that I might not succeed. At school, teachers seemed to notice my obsession, but no one said anything. Perhaps they saw me as just an ambitious straight-A student who wanted to achieve more than her family had planned for her. Maybe they understood more than I thought. Mrs. Thompson would sometimes detain me after class, looking through my work, praising me, advising me on which programs to choose, which essays to write, and which documents to prepare. I saw something like admiration in her gaze, or maybe regret, which I didn't need at all. One day, when I was sitting in the library with another stack of documents, Mr. Randall, our school counselor, approached me, a tall, thin man with glasses on the tip of his nose, who rarely detained anyone unless it was necessary. He carefully placed the brochure in front of me. "I think you should consider this option," he said, pointing to the logo of the university, known for its generous scholarships. "You deserve more than that, Cameron." I stared at the brochure in disbelief. It was a chance. A real chance to escape. I returned home late, clutching the brochure in my hands, having already read it 10 times, imagining what my new life would look like. There was a commotion in the house. As usual, Mom and Lily were discussing some new shoot. Dad was grumbling about work. No one even noticed that I had come. I went up to my room, closed the door, and allowed myself to smile for the first time in a long time. They didn't believe in me. But I believed in myself. And that was enough. Lily went to college, and her departure became an event for which the whole family was preparing as if she were flying not to a neighboring city, but to another planet, marked by tearful goodbyes, solemn speeches, her mother's sobs, her father's proud pats on the shoulder, endless parting words and advice, which she accepted with a familiar, almost lazy with a smile, knowing that the future is already prepared for her, that the roads are open, that any step she takes will be met with support and admiration. I was standing on the sidelines, watching this picture with the same expression on my face as watching an old, overused movie that no longer evokes emotions. Lily left, and I stayed, but now that the house was a little quieter, when the usual outbursts of attention always directed at my sister had dissipated, I felt a strange lightness, as if the oppressive weight that had held me down all my life had disappeared. I plunged into my studies with renewed energy, setting a single goal for myself: to finish school with the best results so that I would have a chance to go to university, no matter what. I spent my days in the library, rereading textbooks, figuring out formulas, analyzing texts, and spending my nights poring over essays, staring at the lines as if my future depended on them, or maybe it did. At this time, I found myself increasingly seeking solitude at Great-Aunt Maggie's house, who seemed to feel that I needed this refuge, needed a place where I could just breathe, where there would be no reminders of who was always first in our family. Her cozy little house, smelling of cinnamon, lavender, and old wood, became a real salvation for me. There I could sit on the couch with a book, hear her grumble at her cats, chat about the weather, and carefully pour tea for me, as if knowing that it was not just a drink, but that something more, something warm, giving hope. One afternoon, when we were sitting in her kitchen veranda, breathing in the fresh air and drinking tea, she looked at me with that look that made my heart ache, a look that read concern, understanding, but also a question that I was afraid of. "Well, Cameron," she said softly, "what are your plans after graduation?" I felt something inside me shrink as I stared into the cup to hide the pain, disappointment, fear. I dunno, Aunt Maggie," my voice faltered, but I quickly pulled myself together. "Mom and Dad won't help me with college. They say that after paying for Lily's education, there is no money left." Maggie paused for a moment, as if digesting what she'd heard, then, without saying a word, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her fingers warm, dry, and full of the confidence I'd been missing. "Cameron, dear," she said softly, "I have some savings. And I'd like to give them to you for college. You're smart as hell, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let your brain go to waste." Her words hit me like a tidal wave. I felt a lump rise in my throat, tears welled up in my eyes, and before I could stop myself, I was sobbing, hugging her with trembling hands, unable to believe that my dreams had not died after all. "Thank you, Aunt Maggie." I managed through my tears, feeling that these were not just words of gratitude, but something more. It was a vow, a promise to myself that I would not let her down, that I would take this chance, no matter what the cost. The months flew by unnoticed, and before I knew it, I was already standing on stage during graduation, holding my diploma with honors in my hands, looking around the hall, filling it with noise, applause, camera flashes. I was looking for the only person who believed in me from the very beginning, and I found Aunt Maggie beaming in the crowd, her eyes full of pride, and at that moment I realized that I had made the right choice. My parents were there too. They looked pleased, but something in their faces told me that this pride was not the same as Maggie's. There was surprise and confusion in her, as if they did not fully understand how it happened that I, their second child, was modest, the inconspicuous Cameron, was able to achieve something meaningful. But I didn't care anymore. That evening, when I was looking through college brochures in my room, my mother came through the door. Her smile was too forced. Her voice was sickly sweet, as if she was trying to wrap words in a sugar cloud that should have made me uncomfortable. "Cameron, dear," she began, sitting on the edge of my bed, "your father's cousin Frank has called, and he can get you a job at his restaurant as a waitress. It's a secure job, not—" She hesitated, glancing at the university flyers in front of me. "Not that exciting." I took a deep breath, feeling an icy stab of irritation run down my spine, but before I could answer, my father appeared in the doorway, frowning, with an expression I already knew he had come not to talk, but to make a decision. "How exactly are you going to pay for it?" "What's that?" he snapped. I lifted my chin higher, not letting myself flinch. "Aunt Maggie is helping me. She gives me her savings for tuition." The silence that followed these words was almost comical. Mom froze, blinking, Dad blushed, his hands clenched into fists, and then he screamed, his voice reverberating through the room, "Of course not. If Meg has any extra money, Lily should have it. She needs a car to work in advertising after graduation." I froze, feeling something inside me boil, burning resentment coursing through my veins as I tried to figure out if they really thought I should give in even now. "Are you serious?" My own indignation burst out before I could contain myself. "This is my chance to get an education, to achieve something. Don't be selfish." Mom frowned, as if I had said something insulting. "Cameron, your sister," she began, but I wasn't listening anymore. "No," my voice was shaky, but firm, unyielding. "Now it's my money, and I'm using it to pay for college." I looked them straight in the eye, holding their gazes, making it clear that the discussion was over. From that moment on, life at home became unbearable. Tension hung in the air, permeating every corner, accumulating in the walls, in silent glances, in heavy sighs that rang out as soon as I just entered the room. My parents either completely ignored me, pretending that I was an empty place, a shadow that shouldn't be here, or, on the contrary, they took it out on me because of small things. I forgot to take out the trash. I got a cold, sarcastic remark. I went into the kitchen at the wrong moment. I ran into an angry look. I rattled mugs. Pouring yourself a cup of tea. Be prepared to hear an annoyed. Do you always do everything so loudly? They didn't speak directly, but every move they made, every carelessly thrown phrase made it clear that I had betrayed my family. I had acted selfishly. I had stolen from Lily what should have belonged to her. I tried to hold on, pretended that I didn't care, that their icy silence didn't concern me, but deep down I felt like I was slowly but surely burning out. The days dragged on for an excruciatingly long time. I tried to avoid my parents, did not linger in the common living room, locked myself in my room, filling it with silence, only occasionally broken by the sound of pages being turned or muffled music in my headphones. But one day, after a particularly unpleasant argument, when my father was snapping at me, and my mother stood aside, folded her arms on her chest and looked at me with disappointment that made me want to scream, I couldn't stand it anymore. The tears were suffocating, the lump in my throat wouldn't let me speak, and I did the only thing I could. I called Aunt Maggie. I told her everything. Everything that had been accumulating in me for the last months, the last years, and as soon as I finished, sobbing into the phone, feeling that I could barely breathe, she said without hesitation, "Pack your things, darling, you're moving in with me." And at the same moment, I realized that this was my chance, the only way out that I had left. The next morning, I stuffed all my things into a suitcase, without saying goodbye, without looking back, without allowing myself to think about what I was leaving behind. The taxi pulled away, and I watched my childhood home shrink in the rearview mirror, disappearing from sight as if it had never existed. I could feel the weight that had been weighing on my shoulders for years gradually dissolving, giving way to something new: relief, hope, anticipation. The summer flew by in a whirlwind of preparation, documents, books, lists of necessary things, purchases, Aunt Maggie's advice, her support, which was now the only stable guideline in my life. Before I knew it, I was already standing on the campus of the State University, surrounded by noise, new faces, and the bustle of freshmen, swallowing delight, realizing that I was here. I'm really here. Thanks to my brilliant grades and the generosity of Aunt Maggie, I enrolled in the management program, and when I sat at my introductory business lecture, absorbing every word of the professor, feeling how this knowledge penetrated me, how my thirst to learn, develop, and grow ignited inside me, I realized that everything was not in vain. Meanwhile, Lily was starting her senior year at her fashion college, and I hadn't heard much from her. My parents didn't get in touch either, as if there was a gulf between us, and probably, to some extent, it was. I tried not to let it bother me. My life finally belonged to me, and I was too busy rebuilding myself, rediscovering the freedom, the excitement of student life, breathing air for the first time without the oppression of other people's expectations. But then, a month after the start of the semester, I got a call from Aunt Maggie. Her voice was soft, careful, but there was tension in it. "Cameron, honey," she said hesitantly, "I think you should sit down." I felt my heart skip a beat. Maggie told me something I'd missed over the past few weeks, a family drama that was playing out in the house I once called my own. Apparently, Lily suddenly showed up at home and announced that she was dropping out of college. The reason? She was pregnant. I sat clutching my phone, trying to process what I'd just heard, but Maggie continued. Lily talked about it lightly, pushing back her hair, smiling, assuring her parents that everything was under control. "Don't worry, the child's father is rich, we will get married soon." Her parents were stunned, but, as always, they found a way to justify her choice, convincing themselves that everything would work out for her, because everything always worked out for her. But the story didn't end there. It turned out that Lily's boyfriend wasn't as loyal as she thought. When he found out that she was sleeping with his friend, real chaos began. Scandals, mutual accusations, dramatic scenes broke out, and in the end he simply disappeared, leaving Lily alone, without support, without the promised marriage, without confidence in the future. Moreover, after all the confusion, they weren't even sure who the child's father really was. Aunt Maggie sighed. I sat in silence, holding the phone to my ear, thinking about it all, feeling a strange mix of emotions that were bursting out. Somewhere in the depths of my soul, a perverse feeling of satisfaction slipped through. The golden child fell from her pedestal, the one who was always perfect, the one whose mistakes were always forgiven, finally faced reality. But that fleeting twinge of schadenfreude immediately faded, replaced by something else: pity. I felt sorry for Lily, sorry that she was in this situation, sorry that, perhaps for the first time in her life, she felt as lost as I had felt all these years. For the next few months, Aunt Maggie kept me informed of all the gossip from family gatherings that I no longer attended, and the picture became more and more depressing. When the baby was born, a DNA test confirmed that his father was indeed the guy with whom Lily had made plans, but the good news ended there. Instead of the fabulous wedding she had imagined, he simply agreed to pay alimony and no longer appear in her life. The parents, of course, were shocked. Their dreams of Lily's bright future were shattered. Now they didn't have to admire her, but to decide what to do next, how to help, how to cope with something they never seemed to expect. But whatever was going on, it wasn't about me anymore. I was living my life. The blow came when Lily, desperate for a job after all her failures, got a job as a waitress at Uncle Frank's restaurant, the very position my parents had once offered me, sincerely believing that this was my ceiling, my only possible path. When I hung up the phone after Aunt Maggie told me the news, I felt a storm of emotions inside me, a clash of two opposing feelings, one of which pushed me to gloat, to mentally rub my family's nose in my success, to let them know how wrong their predictions for my life were. And the other one, quieter, deeper, and more piercing, filled me with gratitude for being where I was now, for making the right choice, for not letting circumstances overwhelm me. The years flew by as if in a blur, disappearing into lectures, exams, sleepless nights when I sat over my textbooks until the last moment, looking for details that could improve my work, honing every thought in order to be the best, to prove to myself, the world, family, Lily, that I deserve more. And so, before I knew it, I was already walking across the stage at the graduation, clutching my hard-earned diploma in management tightly in my hand, looking around the crowd, looking for familiar faces, and, of course, finding Aunt Maggie among them, beaming at me with tears of pride in her eyes. Thanks to my high grades, impressive resume and brilliant recommendations from teachers, I was offered a job as a manager at Gilded Fork, one of the most prestigious restaurants in the city, a place I could only dream of. The salary exceeded all my expectations, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly successful, feeling the weight of the first salary in my hands, knowing that it was the result solely of my work, my efforts, my path, which I chose myself. I knew exactly what I wanted to do first. That same day, I entered an electronics store, glancing through the windows until I found what I was looking for, the latest smartphone model that I knew Aunt Maggie would like. Her face lit up when I handed her the box, and she gasped, carefully turning the sleek device in her hands, as if she couldn't believe it was for her. "Oh, Cameron," she muttered, "this is too much." I just smiled, already pulling out my phone. "Not at all. Now let me show you how to use it." Over the next few weeks, I taught Aunt Maggie all the intricacies of social media, and to my surprise, she got used to them faster than I could have imagined. She especially liked the video feature on Facebook, and soon her page was filled with short videos from her garden, funny moments with cats, and, of course, the secrets of cooking her famous apple pie, which all her friends seemed to know now. I watched her videos during lunch breaks, always trying to leave a comment or like, and it became our way of staying in touch, even when we didn't have time for long conversations. And then one day, when I was busy preparing for an important dinner at a restaurant, my phone vibrated. I took a quick glance at the screen and froze. It was my mother's name. We haven't spoken in years. I felt a strange, contradictory feeling arise in my chest, a mixture of wariness, curiosity, and an old, deeply buried pain. I exhaled, pushing a strand of hair out of my face, then slowly pressed the call button. Cameron. Her voice was uncertain, a little shaky, as if she didn't know how to begin. We were hoping that you would come to talk. After a long pause, to my own surprise, I agreed. On Sunday, I found myself standing on the porch of my childhood home, feeling my insides tighten with the rush of memories. I raised my hand, intending to press the doorbell, but before I could, the door swung open, and the next second, my mother's strong arms hugged me. "Oh, honey, it's so nice to see you." I froze, not knowing how to react, but then I stepped inside, into the space that had once been my home, and felt a strange, almost ghostly nostalgia. My father was sitting in the living room, and next to him was Lily, and on her lap, holding a toy rabbit, was a girl of about 3, obviously my niece. The atmosphere was tense, but not hostile, as if everyone was waiting to see who would speak first. "You look good, baby," his father muttered, his voice rough but warm. "We hear that you're doing well." I nodded, still wary. "I'm a manager at Gilded Fork now." Mom cleared her throat, and Lily's eyes widened at the mention of the restaurant. Its name obviously needed no explanation. "That's wonderful, dear." My mother began, her voice a little strained. I could see that they were nervous, but I didn't know why at the time. "Actually," she continued, avoiding my gaze, "that's why we wanted to talk to you." I felt anxiety rising inside. Over the next hour, they apologized for the past, for their attitude towards me, admitted that they were wrong to deny my potential, that they realized too late what a mistake their behavior was, that they were proud of me, that they wanted to restore the relationship. But then came the real reason for the reunion. Mom looked at Lily, then at me. "Cameron. We were hoping, well, we wanted to know if you could help Lily get a job at your restaurant." There was a dead silence. I looked at my sister, rocking her daughter on her lap, watching as she absent-mindedly stroked the child's back, avoiding eye contact with me, as if not wanting to ask for help, but at the same time realizing that she had no other choice. I felt two opposing emotions fighting inside me, memories of the past, of the years when I was invisible to them, when any of my desires, any of my dreams were considered only as an insignificant detail against the background of Lily's radiance, made me angry, made me want to refuse, tell them that Lily already had a chance. That they had already made a choice, and that choice was not in my favor. But on the other hand, I was looking at her, at a woman who had once seemed unattainable to me, confident in her brilliance and importance, and now sat in front of me with drooping shoulders, with fatigue in her eyes, with a child who clung to her as the only support in this world. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts, feeling the decision form by itself, and finally said, "Let's see what I can do." "No promises." Lily nodded slightly, still not looking me in the eye, and I realized that her pride might have bothered her more than me. True to my word, the next day I spoke with Mr. Reeves, the owner of the restaurant. To my surprise, he listened to me carefully, thought for a moment, and then slowly nodded. "I think we can give her a chance." The position of the administrator. And so, a week later, Lily started working at Gilded Fork. I watched her carefully, preparing for her to either fail or cause a drama, as she always did, but to my surprise, she really tried. She was punctual, learned quickly, was not late, did not complain, did not try to shirk duties, and clients adored her charm, her lightness, her ability to find an approach to everyone. As the weeks passed, I found myself relaxing around her. There was no old acrimony between us, no attempts to hurt each other or emphasize our superiority, as if we were both finally able to put the past behind us. Of course, we didn't become best friends, but work brought us together, and even though our conversations rarely went beyond professional topics, I felt that the tension that had once been an integral part of our relationship was gradually evaporating. As soon as it seemed to me that I had finally sorted out my life, the universe decided to throw me another surprise, this time a positive one. One day, Mr. Reeves called me into his office. My heart started beating faster, 1,000 thoughts raced through my head. I tried to remember if I had made some mistake, if I had forgotten something important, but when I went inside, I saw a grin on his face. "Cameron," he began, leaning back in his chair, "how would you like to help me expand my business?" Before I could figure out what was going on, I found myself overseeing the opening of not one, but 3 new restaurants. My days turned into a whirlwind of meetings with suppliers, staff meetings, menu tastings, calculations, approvals. It was exhausting, exciting, difficult, but at the same time incredibly exciting. I felt like I was growing, like my skills were developing, like I was being trusted more and more. The promotion was accompanied by a substantial increase in salary, and suddenly I realized that I had more money than I could ever have imagined. And that's when the calls from my parents started. At first, it was the little things. "The roof is leaking," my mother said hesitantly when we talked on the phone alone again. "We thought maybe you could help a little." It was so nice to say yes, knowing that now I can solve their problems by simply transferring funds without feeling the slightest worry. First the roof, then a new water heater, then a completely new kitchen. Over time, I realized that I was actually financing the complete renovation of their house, and it no longer looked like a request for help, but rather like an unspoken agreement that now I was not just part of the family, but its new center, the person they were going to for support, the person who decides. When their financial situation stabilized thanks to my monthly allowance, the infamous family parties resumed, but now everything was different. Now that I was present, my mother enthusiastically told the relatives, "Have you heard about Cameron's latest project? She's opening a new restaurant in the city center." I would catch Lily's gaze across the room, and she would smile at me slightly, a light, almost shy smile, in which there was no envy, no attempt at rivalry, but only recognition that I was able to achieve more than anyone had ever expected. Everything was going well for her too. She was promoted to chief administrator, the Gilded Fork, and now that we were working together, our relationship was becoming more even, almost friendly. "My girl's dad," my father exclaimed, hugging us both and patting us on the shoulder with pride. Part of me wanted to be better, wanted to remind them how they treated me before, wanted to ask them questions they might not have been able to answer. Why only now did they see value in me? Why only now did they recognize my success? Why didn't they do it before, was it? But another, more mature and perhaps more tired part of me just enjoyed their warmth, their recognition, their pride, which I had longed for so long. When I returned home that evening, I felt a sense of satisfaction slowly unfolding in me that I had not experienced before. I have achieved everything I wanted: career success, stability, independence. And finally, the love and recognition of his family. I was the golden child now. But more importantly, I was a woman standing on her own 2 feet. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon when my world collapsed around me. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, wrapped in a soft blanket, a cup of still, hot coffee in one hand, my phone in the other, idly scrolling through my Facebook feed until I came across a new video posted by Aunt Maggie. Judging by the description, it was a recording from one of the family meetings that I missed because of work. Smiling, I pressed play, expecting to see the usual scenes: laughter, conversations, maybe another Aunt Maggie pie being cut to applause. But what appeared on the screen made me freeze, my heart skipped a beat, and then thudded down into the very bottom of my chest, where a chilling emptiness was forming. My parents were in the frame. Their faces were flushed from alcohol, their laughter sounded too loud, their words were confused, but there was absolute sincerity in this drunken complacency, devoid of any filters. Mom was gesturing, and her voice, though slightly slurred, was painfully familiar to me, and when I heard it, I was seized with icy horror. "And Cameron," she snorted, rolling her eyes. "This ungrateful little freeloader. She gives us almost nothing. Does he think we're made of money?" I felt my fingers tighten on the phone, my nails digging into my palm, but I couldn't bring myself to take my eyes off the screen. The father nodded, waving his hand lazily, his face flushed, and his lips curled into a grin. "It's true," he said, taking a long drink from his glass. "Yes, we are doing well only thanks to our Lily. She's the one who keeps this fancy restaurant afloat, and Cameron." He shrugged. "He's just following her lead." I could feel the blood pounding in my temples, pounding in my head, my throat was dry, and it took me a moment to realize that the room had turned cold. As the video continued, the camera moved, capturing several relatives sitting nearby. Someone nodded, someone inserted their comments, sarcastic, mocking, as if confirming everything that was said. Lily sat in the corner, silent, her lips pressed together, and although there was something like embarrassment in her gaze, she did not try to object, did not try to stop this filth pouring out of our parents' mouths. When the video ended, I sat in a daze, not believing what I had just heard. After all I've done for them. After all the money I gave them. After all the help she provided, without demanding anything in return. They didn't just reject me, they attributed my success to Lily, and I myself was turned into a shadow, into an insignificant detail, into a bargaining chip, which, apparently, they no longer needed. With shaking hands, I scrolled down the page and saw the comments. "Maggie, delete this video. Right now. You had no right to post this, delete it immediately." It was a message from my mother. My father also wrote something along the same lines, but Aunt Maggie's reply made me cry. I do not know how to delete videos, and even if I did, I would not. It's time for everyone to see the truth about how you feel about Cameron. She supports you, and that's how you repay her. Shame on you. I couldn't tell you how long I sat there in complete silence, rereading the comments over and over again, feeling the pain of betrayal spread through my body, as old wounds that I seemed to have healed a long time ago reopened. Then, without thinking, I picked up the phone and dialed Aunt Maggie's number. "Oh, Cameron, dear." Her voice was filled with sympathy, and from the way she spoke softly, I could tell she'd been waiting for this call. "I assume you've seen the video." "Yes," my voice broke, and I closed my eyes, holding back tears. "I can't believe it, Aunt Maggie. How could they?" I heard her sigh heavily. "They've always been like this, Cameron. You just weren't around to see it." Her words burned more than any insult I could have heard from my parents. "I'm sorry that you had to find out this way, but maybe it's for the best. You deserve to know the truth." We talked for a long time. The hours flew by as Aunt Maggie comforted me, listened to my confused words, my questions that had no answers. I was torn between shock, rage, pain, bitterness, and emptiness. But when night fell, I made a decision. "I'm breaking up with them," I finally said, my voice firm even though the pain was tearing at me from the inside out. "No more money. No more help. They've made their own bed, and now they can lie in it." Aunt Maggie didn't say anything, but I could hear something like relief in her breathing. "I'm proud of you, my girl," she finally said. The days after the revelation from the video were some of the hardest in my life. My parents didn't call. Lily didn't write. And I realized that it was final. My phone kept bursting with messages and calls. My parents, who had been the source of my self-doubt throughout my life, were now desperately trying to hold me back, clinging to the familiar order of things, hoping that I would give in again, become that Cameron again, who could be ignored until she became useful. I saw their messages pop up one by one. Each new line tore me apart from the inside, forcing me to replay their words, their voices, their betrayal in my head again. Finally, after a week of silence, when the calls seemed to only get more insistent, I typed a short message expressing everything I felt. "I saw the video. I know what you really think of me. Don't write to me anymore. The money has stopped." The answers came immediately. At first it was an apology, belated, empty, insincere. "Cameron, honey, we're so sorry. We didn't mean anything by it. You know how it is at the family table. Please forgive us." But I didn't say anything. And every day their tone changed. Apologies gave way to demands, then reproaches, then accusations. "We are your parents. You owe us." Each message was like a new stab, a knife stabbing deeper and deeper. They didn't feel sorry for me. They felt sorry for themselves. They regretted that they had lost access to what they believed was rightfully theirs. But I stood my ground. I gave them chance after chance, and each time they threw them in my face. It's time to break this vicious circle. Surprisingly, Lily stayed away. She was professional at work, performed all her duties with precision, never tried to talk about her family, and did not show that she had suffered in any way because her parents' financial support had stopped. Our communication remained warm but distant, as if we both understood that there were things easier not to discuss. One day, after a staff meeting, when we happened to be alone in the office, she said, before I could leave, "I don't take sides. It's between you and them." I nodded, appreciating her neutrality, but deep down something shrank. Part of me wanted her to stand up for me, openly admit that my parents had treated me unfairly, but I understood that she had her own child, her own life, her own struggle. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself relying more and more on Aunt Maggie. Our Sunday video calls became my salvation, my respite, the moment when I could just be myself, without a mask, without having to prove anything. She told me stories from her garden, shared the latest culinary experiments, and showed me how her apple pie was gaining more and more views on Facebook. "You're doing the right thing, Cameron," she told me when doubts crept into my soul. "Don't let them manipulate you anymore." To my surprise, other relatives also started contacting me. Cousin Sarah, who has always been kind to me at family gatherings, sent me a long email. "I saw the video. I want you to know that I think you're amazing, Cameron. What you've achieved, how you've helped everyone. You're an inspiration. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Uncle Bob, my father's brother, called me without warning. "Baby, I saw you growing up. You've become an incredible woman. Your parents are fools if they don't see how special you are. You have a family by your side. Remember that." These words have become a balm for my wounded heart. I realize that although I may have lost my parents, I have found a family that values me for who I am, not for what I can do for them. Life went on. By the end of the year, Mr. Reeves called me into his office. I walked in feeling a little nervous, wondering if the family drama had somehow affected my reputation, if I had missed something important at work, but to my surprise, he greeted me with a big smile. "Cameron," he began, crossing his arms over his chest. "I'm retiring next year. And I want you to take over my post. CEO of the entire restaurant group." I froze. My head was spinning. I was trying to make sense of what he said, to understand what exactly he was suggesting, what exactly it meant to me. Are you sure?" I managed to stammer. He nodded, confidence glinting in his eyes. "I've never been so sure of anything in my life. You deserve it, Cameron. You're the reason this business is booming. It's time for you to take control." I walked out of his office, still dazed, but with every step, the realization gripped me more and more. I remembered that little girl who stood in the shadow of her sister, who tried not to attract attention because she knew that no one cared about her success, that her achievements meant nothing. I remembered those moments when I was told that I was not that talented, when I was sent to work in a restaurant because no one believed in my dreams, when my name was not even pronounced with pride, when I was seen only as a shadow, as someone's younger sister. And now, I was a woman who exceeded all expectations, including your own.